When I first started to look into the issue of biofuels, or more aptly called agrofuels, I was shocked to see the speed and scale at which this has developed over just in the last 2 years. Millions and millions of hectares of land being converted into the production of monocrops for transport energy. And billions of dollars passing through hands internationally, making deals to facilitate this industry. And policy mechanisms being put into place to mandate targets for large amounts of biofuels in countries like the European Union and the United States, where we use a lot of transport fuel. So having those mandates in place is going to provide a huge impetus to this market. The scale is enormous, and the pace at which it is happening is incredibly fast. It's hard to keep up with. One of the things that is most concerning is that agrofuels are being promoted as a solution to climate change. Well, if you look just at what is happening in the combustion chamber of an automobile, you might be able to make that argument. But if you look further beyond that at the impacts that growing millions and millions of hectares of fuel crops has on the global climate, you cannot no longer make that argument. It becomes completely invalidated, because agriculture has a huge impact on global climate. Global warming, obviously we all know that here, is not just about emissions of greenhouse gases, it's also about protecting and enhancing the carbon sinks in our ecosystems. So turning them into millions and millions of hectares of soy crops and palm oil is not the way to go to protect those ecosystems. This push to promote agrofuels and this transition into using agrofuels on a large scale is driving deforestation. In the United States, we have been using corn to make ethanol, and the demand for corn has escalated to the point where farmers have switched over from growing soy, into growing corn for ethanol production. This has caused a rise in the price of soy, which has caused countries like Brazil, Paraguay, and Argentina to step up to the plate and fulfill the global demand for soy, which is now not being fulfilled by the United States. And so agricultural lands are expanding into the forest frontier in places like the Brazilian Amazon as a result of that chain of events and that chain of connections. Over the past few years, Brazil is actually boasting a reduced rate of deforestation, but as agrofuels have come onto the horizon, the rates of deforestation have escalated. In the past year, up about 8%. And in some areas of the Brazilian Amazon, much higher rates, just between 2006 and 2007, correlated with the increased price of soy. So that is just one example of where we see that agrofuels are promoting deforestation. We cannot call it a solution to climate change because it is ruining the carbon sinks that we have. Other good example is from Indonesia, and I won't go into that in great detail because I believe Abdel is going to talk about palm oil. But palm oil has been expanding very rapidly. There's discussion about a 43-fold increase in palm oil plantations. We're talking about Borneo and Sumatra being 98% deforested by, I believe it is 2012, if I remember correctly, as a result of the expansion of palm oil, which is of course used as a food oil, but also as a feedstock for biodiesel. Again, agrofuels pushing deforestation. Not only is it pushing deforestation, but it's pushing people off of their land. We can't possibly meet the kind of demand that we have for transport fuels from plant biomass without planting enormous areas of the Earth's surface with plants for fuel crops. And to do that, we have to use the land. How are we going to get access? Whose land is that? What is on that land? Those are the questions we have to ask. There are some projects, for example, in Kalimantan Border Project, where there's discussion of 5 million indigenous people being displaced for an oil palm plantation. Not only is it impacting indigenous people, it's impacting the prices of food worldwide, and therefore it's a serious threat to food availability and food production and food sovereignty in many countries. And mind you, it is the northern countries where we drive automobiles for personal use for the most part that are driving this whole process. But it is the southern countries where the sun shines, the labor is cheap, and the land is accessible and available that are paying the price in terms of land and food sovereignty for this. So one of the UN Special Rapporteur on Food recently put out a report in which he said that the production of agrofuels is a crime against humanity, given that 854 million people a year are suffering chronic malnutrition, and millions of children are dying of starvation. To be converting land into the production of fuel crops is a crime against humanity, he said, and called for a moratorium. There are moratorium calls coming from different parts of the world right now. We have one in the United States, which is just coming out. Africa just also put out a call for a complete moratorium on this until it has been thought through more carefully. The solution that is being promoted by the people who are promoting this industry is to move towards further technologies, second generation technologies, if you will, involving the conversion of cellulose from plant material into ethanol instead of using starch in sugar crops like sugarcane and corn. But if we move towards using these other crops, one of the very likely ones is to switch over to using trees. Right now we're looking at a 5-fold expansion in demand for pulp and paper products in the world. We're looking at huge areas of the forest being converted into monoculture tree plantations for various different purposes. We're looking at countries mandating the use of wood for energy and electricity production. How much can we rely on trees and still maintain them as carbon sinks? Can we also produce transport fuel from them? Given the scale of demand for transport fuel, it will mean that vast areas of the forest will have to be converted into plantations for that purpose. I just want to end by saying the agrofuels industry has nothing to do with climate change and with protecting the global climate. It has nothing to do with people and their rights or food access or anything like that. It is a strategy by corporations who stand to benefit from this, and it is the same corporations like the oil industries, agribusiness, the biotechnology corporations who are genetically engineering various things for use for energy crops. Those are the driving forces behind this. It has nothing to do with global warming. However, it's absolutely relevant to everything we're talking about here, especially deforestation.